Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Jon Bellion called Glory Sound Prep. So I think I wound up alienating a lot of people the last time I reviewed Jon Bellion. Now, to be fair, some of this was intentional. I knew the whole thesis of Owl City trying to be Kanye West as the main comparison point for Jon Bellion. That would be controversial as I dug through the tangled mess of genres that comprise that album. But you know what? The more I return to it, the more it fits. The blocky production blending, the uncanny knack for a decent tune and hook marred by lyrical ideas that would have been better left on the drawing board, the flailing attempts at certain genres that left me wondering how hard I should wind up laughing, the contradictory religious subtext that was probably best left unexamined. But you know what? When Jon Bellion's The Human Condition worked, it was magical. The big hit might have been All Time Low, a song that grew on me more than I ever could have expected, but I found a slew of deep cuts that I revisit to this day. The biggest highlights for me remain Hand of God and Morning in America, both songs that were among my favorite songs of 2016. Still to this day, they hold up. But Fashion, 80s Films, even He Is the Same have all wound up on my personal playlist. They're great songs, and I was convinced that once Jon Bellion managed to iron out his wildly uneven tendencies, he could make something truly great and refined. So, Glory Sound Prep, sophomore album, a fair bit shorter than his last one, but also featuring Rock Marciano and the RZA on a song. Alright, look, Jon Bellion's stabs at hip-hop are always the most awkward and embarrassing parts of any of his albums, and I had to hope he wasn't doubling down on it this time. So what do we get from Glory Sound Prep? Well, honestly, this isn't quite what I was expecting. I mean, you would think that given his diehard fan base that he built from his full-length debut and the popular success from All Time Low would inspire some greater ambition and risks now that he's got that opportunity. But the awkward thing with Glory Sound Prep is how guarded, sour, and oddly conservative it feels. Which, yes, for a Jon Bellion project does wind up feeling more stable and consistent, but it also winds up losing some of those huge heavenly moments that were the biggest reason I'd go back to listen to him in the first place. And while we get a few glimpses of those greater moments on this album, it's hard to avoid the feeling that we're getting the safe bet coming from Jon Bellion, which makes for a listen that, okay, it's more consistent and cohesive, but it's not as good, and it's a lot less interesting. And here's the thing, I totally get why Jon Bellion might have gone in this direction, because it places him in his comfort zone and doesn't really demand that he take a big risk, especially if he's got an audience on board already who is accepting of his blocky, honking synth melodies, the opulent arranged passages, and the unstable beats that can occasionally hit some grand swell at the expense of any sort of texture. One of the reasons it's so damn strange to see the RZA and Rock Marciano here, given that Jon Bellion's production is trying to pick up more New York City opulence without any of the texture and grip you'd expect for that brand of hip-hop. No, what this reminded me a lot more of, bizarrely enough, is Logic's pop rap ventures. Tones that reflect a lot of smoothness with decent enough hooks, a fixation on ascendant, heavenly progressions with a lot of horns that often wind up feeling a hell of a lot more self-satisfied than they probably should, some solid but occasionally awkward flows and forced references. Hell, on JT we even get the Tarantino reference. We've seen that from Logic before. No, the biggest difference here is that Jon Bellion leans a lot more on his religious iconography, both in his singing and his bars, which can feel increasingly jarring as it's delivered with the sort of blunt, reference-driven punchlines that are well enough structured in their double entendres, but Jon Bellion just sounds awkward selling them. Him being a rapper, it's not his best lane. But it might as well lead to my first big quandary with this album, because he's a fairly elastic performer. From the pop-rock multi-track belting of A Cut Like the Internet, to the softer crooning of Conversations with My Wife, and Couples Retreat, and Stupid Deep. So why he defaults to the forced rhymes of Let's Begin, or the three-part Adult Swim, to ram in the bulk of his more layered content, just strikes me as a complete misunderstanding of his strengths as a performer. And while I'm on that subject, am I the only one who thinks that the lyrical nuance has taken a significant step back on this album as well? I mean, the power of the best songs on The Human Condition came in his very earnest approach to pop melodrama. As an artist who is smart enough to be self-aware and realize some of his worst and most human instincts, but then commit to them anyway with huge anthemic populist moments that swung around to become kind of awesome and really resonant. Whereas here, you know what, I'd like to say that the self-awareness is there, but it comes out most in the self-aggrandizing rap cuts that really test my patience instead of more of the pop songs, which wind up feeling a fair bit less complex in their emotional dynamics and their framing. That's not saying that they're bad. The self-flagellating love songs of Conversations with My Wife and Blue and Couples Retreat, they're not bad songs, they're fine enough. And the closer we get to the more layered emotional dynamics, they do come through on Cautionary Tales and especially JT, although really both songs just kind of ride on ego, but hey, that can work in the right lane. But a prime example of the change in the framing comes on the internet, which feels a lot like the reflexive commentary of fashion, but minus the sense of populism that can make it feel relatable beyond just another screed against social media. And honestly, I'm kind of tired of them at this point. And then you get a song like Ma's Joints, where the self-awareness almost drops away completely to tell the story of his grandmother losing her memory to dementia, and how much value the memories made really have, as the devil says, we're just gonna forget them. And that's a loaded question. I think Jon Bellion does make the point of how these memories still shape who we are today and now to value them. The missed opportunities also come up in the third verse of Adult Swim in a decent enough way, about a song that he was gonna give to Beyonce but wound up going to Demi Lovato and Christina Aguilera instead, and he wondered about the missed opportunity or possible broken relationship there. But there is a certain irony that Jon Bellion's songwriting on this album, it seems to be guarding himself against actually making those deeper memories in his music in the first place instead of swinging for the fences. Now, part of this seems to be tied to the bizarre conflict he forces with his own ego, trying to remain humble in the face of his success like God was intending, but then trying to shun fake humility so he can then flex and keep it real. It just leads to this weird, messy paralysis that feels unsatisfying as a whole. It doesn't seem to click as a self-conscious takedown as much as it really should, giving you the feeling that he might just be better off getting out of his own head. Hell, he even outright retreats from making an actual political point in Let's Begin, in the final lines of his verse, that might have had some edge, with themes of making memories where systemic racism can snuff that out so quickly for a certain audience. But nope, can't get that real. Of course, the other problem is the sense that the production is taking fewer chances too. And outside of JT, I'm not sure there's a hook that comes remotely close to matching the best of the human condition. And even then, JT works because of some well-placed multi-tracking as the blubbery, beeping production, more than any sort of dramatic crescendo or swell. Oh, don't get me wrong, the album certainly tries to go for that. The rich cushion of strings behind Rock Marciano's verse on Let's Begin, and honestly not a great verse from him. The breathy choirs behind Stupid Deep and Couples Retreating against all those faded touches of sleigh bells, the blasts of horns and that guitar surging up the bridge of the internet, and the extended instrumental outro full of trumpets aided by Quincy Jones on Ma's Joint. But again, it's not like that song ever hits the dramatic heights of Hand of God, admittedly a high as hell bar for any artist for an outro song, but it's hard to avoid the feeling of anticlimax with how that song meanders for its final few minutes. And let's not beat around the bush, even the slightly more experimental touches we do get, they lack cohesion, punch, and groove, which are consistent structural problems that remain pretty glaring here from the last album. The overmixed blocky squonk and skitters of blue that feel cribbed from an Arca song, at least before it all blurs into the hook with more arranged elements tacked on with every line. The awkward chunky crunch of the guitars opposite the uncredited Will Smith hook of Cautionary Tales that really could have used some looser percussion to make that bass line work and have a groove. Hell, Adult Swim literally feels like three different pieces mashed together with no consideration for transitions or blending. And here's the thing, I was at least going to be a little more forgiving with the human condition because it was aiming for greatness and for the fences, going for broke at its best moments. Like with Kanye West, the awkward blockiness of the assembly could be forgiven for the insane highs you occasionally got. Though with a more pronounced sense of reserve, the fact these production issues only remain, they accentuate the stilted, awkward structure of a fair few of these songs, and yeah, that becomes more of a problem. But look, as a whole, I'm being hard on this album, I admit it, but what's frustrating is that I want Glory Sound Prep to hit a lot harder than it does. Jon Bellion is a really promising songwriter with a great gift for melody and a style that can at least feel somewhat unique against this over-polished genre pile-up that you get from all his imitators. But when so many of the songs feel stifled and overthought and wind up making far less of a genuine point, look, I get some of the theme is being compromised by expectations to continue greatness, but having that play out in execution reaction on your album isn't exactly satisfying. The album's got the feel of going to a party where the host doesn't feel like he deserves to celebrate and have it in the first place. And despite some good moments, it just feels odd for everyone involved, which means I'm giving this a solid 6 out of 10 and a recommendation for the fans, but I can't promise it'll hold up to the same standards, let alone the highs. I mean, give it a listen if you're curious, but the lack of success for this project might just be what Jon Bellion needs to really experiment going forward. A sad irony if it's true, but I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know I was pretty harsh on it. You tell me how wrong I am in the comments and the polls up there. Have fun. Beyond that, if you want to buy or stream the album, links are down there below. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process so I could have covered this earlier, or help support the channel, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote for my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, guys get to add albums, movies, or even top 10 lists to that schedule, winding up on the end of the year, so if you want to get stuff in, better try it out now. Also, if you want to see what's on my schedule, it's on my Instagram, link down there below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.